Oscar Wilde said, we should call things by their proper names. It makes matters simpler. And so when you hear arguments like that about the death penalty, like, well, we should throw them in a cage, we shouldn't kill them because it's not, it's immoral for the state to do that. What if the person's innocent, and so on, so on, so on. And then they'll come back with something like that. And we know why they're doing it, by the way. They'll say, we should throw them in a cage for the rest of their lives. That's way worse than death. First off, ask the people on death row who are filing appeal after appeal after appeal, or people who are imprisoned who do that. Because if you're on death row, then it seems like a strange thing that you'd be filing for appeal after appeal after appeal to be sent to general population for the rest of your life, rather than be executed. In other words, if you want to know if which is worse, look at the people who are doing it. It's kind of like, I think back, like I have students a lot of times when we talk about slavery, they'll say things like, man, I would never be a slave. Hell no, I'd fight that. There's no way you take me. Yeah, and people say the same thing about concentration camps. Oh man, you never would have put me in a concentration camp. Hell no, I'd have fought. I don't know, man. Millions and 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 millions of people throughout history went into slavery and went into what we would equate to being concentration camps. And so in other words, those are people who chose the fate that wasn't death. They chose to take the other one. And it's a weird thing when we kind of sit back at this zenith of history and look back on it and say, well, I wouldn't have done that. It's easy to say that when we know how things turn out. It's kind of like, I remember after 9/11 happened, a lot of people were talking about, if I'm ever on a plane, I never would have allowed hijackers to take over a plane the way they did and fly it into tower. If I was on that plane, I would have fought. But no, you wouldn't have. We know this because you had planes full of people who did not fight. You had one plane that did, but the only reason that they fought, turns out, what we think, is because they were hearing reports about what was happening. And they realized, we're on a suicide mission anyway, so we have to fight. Because before September 11th, there were hijackings, I don't want to say all the time, but frequently. And normally when the plane was hijacked, it would just be, they're going to land it somewhere, they're going to ask for a ransom, we're going to sit in the plane for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks even, but eventually we're going to get out of this, and that was the norm. Then after September 11th, everything changed. And so it's I don't know. It's a weird thing with regards to the death penalty, because we'll say things like that. Well, these people who are against the death penalty will say stuff like that, like, people who are against the death penalty on humanitarian grounds will say things like that. It's way worse to throw them in prison for the rest of their lives, because they want to appeal to the people who are in favor of the death penalty. In other words, there are people who just want retribution. You murdered somebody, so we want to just murder you back. And so they're appealing to those people. Obviously, it's a rhetorical trick, but it's also dishonest. We should just call things by their proper names. I think we'd probably get a lot farther. It'd make us more uncomfortable, but the more innuendo that we talk in, the less honest we can be, the less direct we can be. And it takes us a lot longer to get to places. Whatever that's worth. So Solzhenitsyn. Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn wrote a book called The Gulag Archipelago. It's a big, giant book. It's like that big, and it's really small font also. So as big as the book is, it's a lot longer than it even looks. And I might mess up his story a little bit, but it goes something like this. He was an officer in the Soviet Army, and he was during World War II, and he wrote a letter back home that was critical of the way that Stalin was executing the war. It wasn't like he's completely unfit for leadership or something like that. It was more like I don't like the way that we are just mounting up bodies. Because if you know how the war was initially fought by the Soviets, they'd have three guys out there, one with a rifle, one with ammunition, and then one who would tag along. And those three guys would run together. And the guy who was shooting, if he got shot, then the next guy would pick up the gun, and the other guy would carry the ammo. So they had one rifle for every three soldiers, and that was the idea. Just go together, and then whoever dies, pick up their rifle. They were just feeding bodies into the meat grinder over there. That was the idea with Stalin. It was just throw as many bodies at the problem as possible, and it was honorable to die for the fatherland and all that. Which, yeah, it's honorable to die for the fatherland as long as you're not the person doing it, right? it's an interesting, when you compare the political systems of someone like Stalin, who was a psychopath, but through and through, who did not care about human life whatsoever. I think it was him who said that the death of one person is a tragedy, but the death of 1 million people is a statistic. And so he wasn't worried about all these bodies piling. When you look at how many people died on the Soviet side in World War II, it's just unreal. I mean, it was just massive. But that's because he didn't, the Soviet system, they don't see people as individuals. That's part of being a communist. You don't see people as individuals, you see people as collectives. It wasn't, did this one person live or die, it was, did we win, comrades? And so, you compare that to someone like General Patton, who was an American general, who said that it wasn't heroic to die for your country, it's heroic to let the other, dumb son of a bitch die for his country. So the point of war is not to be a hero by dying. The point of war is to let somebody else be a hero for their country by killing all of them. Two very different approaches to the war. But anyway, so Solzhenitsyn writes this letter to his family, critical of Stalin, excuse me, and the mail was read, and so by Soviet officials. So someone read the letter, and went and took him and threw him in a gulag. And a gulag is a concentration camp, and so he spent several years in these concentration camps, and it was called and his book was called the Gulag Archipelago because there were so many of them all over the Soviet Union that it looked like an archipelago, a chain of islands all over the place. And so when he's in there, he starts to write this book. I've read that he wrote the whole book. I just don't know how that's humanly possible, but well, at least say he started to write the book at the very least. But he wrote it through memory in his own head, so that when he gets out of prison, he writes the whole book in just a matter of a couple of weeks. And again, it's just this giant, massive tome. And if not for that book, we wouldn't know about some of the horrors of the Soviet Union. We wouldn't know about the body counts. And so when he gets liberated finally, first off, he's brass. He continues to live in the Soviet Union even after he publishes this book that reveals the horrors of the Soviet Union. Finally, he ends up having to flee at one point. But he writes in such incredible human detail because he's a historian, but he's not writing about, this year this happened and these people. Shouldn't use that voice. It's a terrible voice. You can tell a lot about a person, right? What they think about you by the voice that they use when they imitate you. Like you have like a teacher and you're like, they were saying, you shouldn't do this. It's a terrible impression of people. But anyway, you can tell what you think about a person by the way that they talk. Anyway, so there are these historians who typically write in a very kind of depersonalized way about the millions of people, and this way happened, here's what happened. Solzhenitsyn writes about it as somebody who's inside of the history. He's talking about, here's what I went through, and here was my experience. And it's not just an ethnography of, here's my lived experience. He's writing in this cultural context. He's saying, here's what happened, and I know it, here's what I saw. And he's talking to people, and here's what we encountered, and all that. When you're looking at the horrors of the Soviet Union, it's really, like I've talked about it, it's really mind-boggling. If you really understand what happened over there, that today, if I walked through campus with a Nazi flag, people would be upset, maybe a little perturbed. But if I walked through campus with a Soviet flag, most students probably wouldn't even bat their eyes. They probably wouldn't think anything of it.
We would cheer for you.
Yeah, probably end up cheering for me. Okay, so if I were to walk through campus again with the Nazi flag, people would rightfully be pretty upset about that. If I walked through campus with a Soviet flag, most people probably wouldn't even know what it meant. Most people probably wouldn't even bat an eyelash at it. I had professors who had Soviet hammer and sickle stuff in their offices when I was going through university. And it's just one of those things that's accepted where it's like, yes, I'm a communist, I'm a Soviet. But my God, you look at what Hitler did. Hitler killed, 11, 12 million people in the concentration camps. Stalin heard that, and he was like, wow, that's a lot of people. Hold my vodka. He killed around 70 million people, 50 to 70 million people. And then Mao Zedong heard that, and he was like, my God, that's a lot of people. Watch this. And he was responsible for between 70 and 90 million people. That's why when we look at everything that's piled up in the 20th century, when we're always saying like, oh, we'll get it right. We'll do it right this time. We'll do communism right this time. Watch this. really? How many bodies have to pile up before we finally look at that and say, maybe it's just a degenerate system? Yeah, and you'll know it because you'll talk with people who will say things like, well, that wasn't real communism. That's exactly the thinking that leads to those kinds of atrocities. It's someone who says, oh, but we didn't do it right last time. Stalin, he did it wrong. But we'll find someone who can do it right next time. How many, again, they don't see you as an individual. They see you as a collective. They see you as a group. Franco is warning us about this, the idea of collective guilt. One of the ways that you got sent into one of the gulags was they were referred to as the kulaks. These were the people who were the farmers, the agriculturalists. These are people who were doing very well in Russia. And Stalin had them identified as counter-revolutionaries and threw them all in the gulags. What do you suppose happens when you throw all the farmers into the gulags? There's no food. Yeah. And so in Ukraine, in fact, a friend of mine, who I know, a good friend of mine, tells me these stories that he remembers growing up in Ukraine and seeing these billboards that were, they call it billboards now, like, hey, get your flu shot, from the government, telling us about what proper behavior is. He remembers seeing billboards when he was a little kid telling parents not to eat their children because cannibalism was widespread in Ukraine because they were starving, because there was just no food. Like right now, you walk in your kitchen and you sit there and you're like, there's no food. Maybe there's like a box of Triscuits and you're like, I'm not that hungry yet. So you walk away. But imagine if there really genuinely is zero to eat. And not just like for a couple of days, but I'm talking about for weeks and for months. No matter where you go, there's no food to be had anywhere. And so they get so desperate, they start doing things like eating leather. If you've seen the little kids like in Ethiopia with their very round bellies, and you wonder like why like the little kids have these really round bellies, because in Ethiopia their parents will make mud cakes, which is exactly what it sounds like. You take mud and you pack it and you put it into a fire until it hardens. Then they'll give their kids that to eat because there's nothing else to eat. At least there's something in their stomachs. But when you do that, of course, there's parasites and all kinds of things that you're ingesting because it's in the soil. But then again, you might be like, you shouldn't do that. What should you do? There's nothing to eat. And so people in Ukraine were eating their babies because it solved two problems. It solved the idea of food. It also solved the problem about the baby starving. And we look at that and we're like, I would never. We started with that one. Remember, I would never be a slave. I would never be in a concentration camp. I would never eat my children. Maybe.
What was that last one?
I'd never eat my baby. Yeah. Maybe. But it's just like, if you guys remember the first few weeks of the semester, I asked you, to imagine yourself if you were a concentration camp guard. Do you imagine that you could do the atrocities that were done in those places? And if your immediate reaction is, oh, hell no, I would never have done, maybe you don't know yourself very well. Now, because we know that lots and lots of people did do that stuff. And if you're going to say that I wouldn't have done that, you have to acknowledge there's something different about you. You have to acknowledge that what they were doing, it wasn't like they were little kids in grade school and they were being asked, so what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to torture and murder Jews in concentration camps. Aww. Little gold star. No, they can't give him a gold star. That was for somebody else. Let that one sit in. Yeah, that would have been the bad star to give them. Here's some extra credit. Whatever. They didn't do that. People find themselves in these situations, and this is the thing about it. Were the people who worked in concentration camps evil? They certainly did evil things. Is there a distinction between being evil and doing evil? And how much evil do you have to do? It's like if I were to, I think it was in this class, I don't remember if it was this class, I did the good person test. Remember what this was? I asked somebody, would you consider them to be a good person? No, absolutely. Have you ever told a lie before? Well, yeah. So what does that make you? It makes you a liar. But it's only one lie. How many murders do you have to commit before you're a murderer? Probably just one, right? So maybe one lie makes you a liar. Have you ever stolen anything? What does that make you? People oftentimes will say, it makes me a stealer. Only if you play football in Pittsburgh. It makes you a thief. It makes you a thief. So, just with two questions, you're going to tell me that you're a lying thief. So, are you still a good person? Well, yeah, but I don't do that all the time. Well, a murderer doesn't murder all the time. If you look at O.J. Simpson, he had a mostly peaceful day. But you know, it was just that last part of it where he murders his wife and another guy. You know, well, otherwise it was mostly peaceful. It's probably all right. No, that's not a good way of looking at it. So how many lies you have to tell? How many murders you have to commit? I don't know what those lines are. You know, but that is the hard part, is that we want those kinds of answers. We want to be able to look at someone and say, evil. Because if we can do that, that's simple. Now we can grab that person, pull them out of society, and kill them. But isn't that exactly what you see happening today with cancel culture? This person's a terrible person. Grab them, pull them out of society, excise them from culture. Good. Now we've gotten rid of the expert. Now, who else? Who else dares to stand against our narrative? And then people go out. And what's funny is that most people don't agree with it. Most people just go along with it. And that's very different from agreeing with it. You know, it's like if we come in here and we tell jokes, you know, I can tell you some god-awful offensive jokes. And so what happens is that most people will laugh at it because most people will understand the point of dark humor. You know why I tell you dark humor jokes? Frankel tells you in his essay. Because that's one of the ways that we deal with tragedy in life. What can you do about it? Tragedy happens, it's going to happen. How can you deal with it? One of the ways that you can deal with it is you can laugh. Yeah, I was telling you guys earlier, I'm really damn certain I tore the ACL in my left knee last night. And what did I tell you? Oh, now I have a matching set. I could come in here and be like, guys, I'm having a really hard day. Okay, we're just going to watch a movie. Okay. What's wrong, Scout? Nothing. I guess maybe that would be funny. But it's kind of like the injury's there. It hurts. Is it going to make it better by not joking about it? No. Does it make it better by joking about it? Yeah. It lends some levity to it. It's one of the reasons I tell you dark humor jokes. We have to kind of draw this distinction at some point between laughing about things and laughing at things. You shouldn't make fun of people. You shouldn't laugh at people. There's nothing wrong with if you're telling a joke, you shouldn't necessarily make fun of people, but it's still funny, you know? In other words, like for example, I have a standing rule. I don't make fun of anybody about something that they can't control. Now, you can control your hair for the most part, but you can't control other parts about yourself. That's easy stuff to make fun of, you know? Like someone's got like for example, what do you call a kid in a wheelchair? A little kid in a wheelchair. Names. You know? Why? They can't defend themselves. Well, thank you. But that's easy. That's lazy. You know, stuff that people can't control. Find stuff that people can control. That's funny to make fun of.
Like when they stutter?
Yeah, when they stutter. Exactly. I'm going to be very careful about my stuttering for the rest of it. And even then, I stutter. Shut up. But that's the thing, is like, yeah, I stutter. So is it going to make it better if we don't make fun of it? Defense scamming, we should not. But this is the point. There's usually like one person, two people in the group. The rest of everybody else is laughing about it. And it's just like that one or two people. Then what happens though when that one person, those two people, then make a fuss about it? The problem is most people go, well, you can't say anything today. And then we walk away. So why? 1 or 2% of the people are going to lose their minds over it. The problem is we go along with it. It's like I was saying a few weeks ago, I'm uncancelable. Why? Because I don't go along with it. You know? People who go along with it, those are the only people who are cancelable. It's really funny when you see people who get canceled and you look back in their history and you see that they were one of those people who's canceling everybody. The reason it's funny is because, and I mean it's funny, true funny, but also funny like sardonically funny. Because that's exactly what happens in the Soviet Union. You wipe out all the kulaks, and now you say the cause of all of our suffering are those people. It's the rich people. So what do? You grab the rich people, you kill them all, you take all their stuff, you distribute it, and what problem just got solved? No problem. No problem got solved. Because you take their farms. Does anybody know how to farm in here? No? Kind of? Shit, you do?
Just put it in the dirt.
Put it in the dirt and wait. And then you just wait, you know? I think about how lucky I am. Like people like last night, like I said, I tore my knee. Now you could look at it and go, that's just such a horrible thing. Are you kidding me, dude? I'm actually able to come in here and do my job, work, and then I'm going to go to the doctor in a few hours and go get checked. Why? Because I can. Imagine if this had happened 100 years ago, 150 years ago. You know, it would have been like, what's wrong? I don't know. Well, it looks like he has to die. Because he's holding the rest of us back. You know? We have it so good with that. But the point is that because we have people who know what to do. Imagine if you get rid of all the doctors. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you know, you ask that question, like, imagine if all the smart people went away. And then we can cheer about that. Yeah, no, that's bad. That's bad. Does anybody know how any of this stuff works? How the lights work? Yeah. How does this projector work? Anybody know how that works? I don't know how it works. I'm pretty smart. I can sit here and talk to you philosophically. Here's how it works. You know, I can find the deeper meaning in all the smart people going away. Wouldn't that be a terrible thing if all the smart people, all the smart people go away, and I'm still here to teach you? What does that tell you? You know, it's like, all right, all the smart people are gone, Scal, let's go teach the kids. Did you want me to go away too? No, you're fine, you can stay. Okay. If you want me to go, just let me know. We'll let you know. Thanks. But this is the thing: you get rid of all the landowners, you get rid of all the rich people, and you go there. Those are the enemies of the revolution. Now we can live in our utopia. But then, of course, utopia never comes. So now what happens? Why are things failing? Shit, why are things failing? It's the Jews. Grab them. Let's go. Round them up. You know the routine. Not your first time. You pull them all up. And then what happens? You wipe all the Jews and you go, all right, problem solved. And then things still suck. Why?
Because there's always a want.
Yeah.
You're never satisfied.
Yeah, you're never satisfied because the problems aren't outside of us. The problems are inside of us. In other words, the reason that like we look at why is there inequality? You know, first off, is inequality even a bad thing? We kind of presuppose having inequality is a good thing. I'm sorry, we presuppose that inequality is a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. I don't think any of us believe it's a bad thing. I wonder if you guys are when you guys are 18, how many of you guys want to vote? Do you guys want your 4-year-old, nieces and nephews to vote? Probably not. So you don't want that equality. If any of you guys go and start companies, do you want to earn the same amount of money as your employees do? Probably not. I wonder how many of you guys think that I should earn as much money as a guy like Jeff Bezos, who started Amazon and runs it, and has made many, many people very, very, very wealthy. I mean, we don't believe in it, but we do have to recognize. Here's the problem in that, though. Inequality is a problem because when it's so massive, it does create massive social rifts, and that's the problem with things like this. There's a kernel of truth in there. It isn't inequality is bad or inequality is good. It isn't as simple as just, it's that dividing line that's so hard to find, because somewhere in there is where maybe we think it should be. Who knows where that is? At what point is inequality bad? At what point is a person evil? It's when we don't have when we have these fine gradations between black and white, when things are not just black or white, but there's a lot of gray. And that's where solving real social problems becomes difficult. And that's why we struggle with it so much. But this is also why we look for quick and easy answers. The reason I'm doing badly in life is because of that group right there. If we just got rid of that group right there, things would be fine. If you're looking at cancel culture, whether you like it or not, does anybody think that things online are settling down and are becoming more more pleasant online? Or are things getting ratcheted up, or are things getting worse online? I don't understand. Why are things getting worse? We're purging all the bad people from online. How come things keep getting worse? Because we keep having to find more bad people to justify our actions. These are the things that he's talking about. So when I say it's funny, I'm saying it's funny sardonically, also funny laughter-wise, because if you're one of those people who's purging people out, well, I know exactly where you would have been in the Soviet Union. I know exactly where you would have been during the Nazi regimes. It's not hard to find people at all, to figure out where people would have sat. I mean, if you look at what's happened here in this country in the past year and a half, I mean, we ask this question, like, how could so many people have fallen behind an ideology that they didn't understand? And we shake our heads. Do we have any corollary in the past year and a half of people rallying behind things that they don't understand? It's so weird that we sit back, like I said, over this thing of history and say, I never would have been a slave. I never would have gone to a concentration camp. I never would have gone to a gulag. I never would have given the government so much control they could just wipe people out. I never would have. Really? Really? You know? I'm telling you, of course, it's not popular because the popular thing is to go along because it's easier. It's not that people are stupid. It's not. It's just that people have other things to do. And how many of y'all want to sit here every day of your life and I don't know, fight dark humor online? Here's the problem. There are people whose whole lives are wrapped around that. And they have the time to do it. You know? I have a joke.
Say it. Say it.
It's not really a joke. It's a true story. I'll leave it at that. Any questions, comments?
Say it.
All right.